welcome in to Texans Today. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs. Yes, me, Jeremy Chuggs. I'm your host here on Texans Today, and on today's program, we're going to be going over the top wide receivers the Texans could sign in NFL free agency. But before we do that, I need your help. We're a little low on the sub count this month. I know, 28 days compared to a normal month, but my boss has said, hey, can you get 50 subs on a video? Can you get 50 subs on this video? So you can help me out. If you want Texans news and rumors videos every single day, go down and hit that sub button. It's 100% free, and my promise to you. And what I always say to everyone when they ask me about the channel, I say, hey, subscribe. Give me 1 week. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. It is 100% free, and you get daily Texans videos out of it. So go down and hit that sub button, or go to youtube.com/TexansTV to subscribe today. So let's get right into the nitty-gritty. My top 10 free agents the Texans could sign at the wide receiver spot. Number 10 coming in is Curtis Samuel, who a sneaky good, guy who the Texans could look at signing. Was with the Washington Commanders, formerly with the Carolina Panthers this season with quarterback Sam Howell, 62 receptions, 613 yards, 4 touchdowns. A guy who is really a shifty guy, can make plays in space, a speedster who can take the top off of a defense. Could be a good option if the Texans are looking to, not spend as much money at the wide receiver spot this offseason. Curtis Samuel, number 10 on my list. Number 9 coming in is Michael Thomas, which a couple years ago, if I said Texans are going to sign Michael Thomas in free agency, everybody would freak the F out. But had a couple years in New Orleans where really wasn't himself. He wasn't the guy who we saw who broke the single season record for yards in a season with Drew Brees. I mean, he just has not felt at home in New Orleans these past couple of years. Could he be looking for fresh scenery? Could he be looking for a new team? A good big body guy who you can put opposite of Nico Collins. I actually do have producer Trace, who is the host of our Saints channel. What would you have to say about the Texans signing Michael Thomas?
My only one thing you need to consider is the fact that Mike Thomas is still dealing with injury issues. He found himself on injured reserve again this season. So if you want to pay him some good money to be a decent wide receiver 2 or 3, he's perfect in the slot. He's a big-bodied guy who can still make plays, but there is injury concerns.
There you have it. That's why I have him a little bit lower on my list. Even though he's a bigger name, I couldn't put him higher than number 9 on this list. Now, coming in at number 8 is Calvin Ridley, which had, a lot of people were really high on Ridley this past offseason and saying, he could really make this Jaguars offense explode. And yes, he had over 1,000 yards, had 8 touchdowns, came on late for the Jags in their offense, really was a factor later on in the year. But a reason that I don't want to sign Calvin Ridley is, as stupid as it sounds, it helps the Jaguars a little bit if they don't re-sign Calvin Ridley. Because if they sign Calvin Ridley, the whole deal with them and the Falcons was predicated on if they re-sign Calvin Ridley, they have to give up a draft pick to the Atlanta Falcons. So I don't know if they re-sign him. I kind of want to force their hand and see what they do. I would like to see them re-sign them and have to give up a draft pick to the Atlanta Falcons. Also, I don't know how he fits with this Texans team. Could be a really good, second, third option with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. He makes my top 10, but at the end of the day, I can't really help out a division rival like the Jacksonville Jaguars. I would like to sign Calvin Ridley, but I also like to see the Jaguars lose the draft pick. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Let me ask you this, though. How do you want the Texans to add a wide receiver this offseason? I think it's a foregone conclusion that the Texans will add a wide receiver at some capacity, either in the draft or free agency. But which one do you prefer? Do you think they should draft a guy or sign one of these guys in free agency? Give me a D for draft or an F for free agency. This is going to be the pinned comment on today's video. So if you get a YouTube ad break, perfect timing. Go down and let me know how you would want the Texans to add a wide receiver this offseason. Coming in at number 7 on my list is Darnell Mooney. He's a younger guy, has played well in the past, really didn't do too hot this year in Chicago. Only 414 yards, 1 touchdown, with the Bears, but I do like his potential. He showed some flashes whenever he was the wide receiver 1 in Chicago, and I do think still at a young age, he was learning a new offense this past off season. I think if you bring him in, he's a guy who you can get at a sneakily cheap deal, and that's why I have him in at 7, because in my list, I kind of took into account how much these guys are going to take to sign, also how old these guys are, and how much I think they can really improve this Texans roster. That's why I have Darnell Mooney at 7, maybe a little bit higher than other people have him on their list. But for the price range, I think Darnell Mooney is a decent get for the Houston Texans. Coming in at number 6, it's a Bengals wide receiver, not named T. Higgins. It is Tyler Boyd, a good 3. We've seen already that he can thrive in a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 role. He's done it with the Bengals with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I think he could be a decent player that the Texans could snag if you're asking me. Big body guy, 6'2", 203 pounds, could be a good deep ball threat. And like I said, already has experience being a wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 3 in this league, and has excelled at that. So if you add him to this wide receiver room, I think that could be a good get for the Houston Texans in free agency. Coming up, my top 5, but you're asking me my top daily fantasy sports app? Well, that's easy, folks. It's Prize Picks. It's Prize Picks, and it'll always be you, Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. They have daily specials and discounts. You can combine NBA, NFL whenever it's in season. Also, baseball coming up. They have UFC. They have hockey. They have everything you need. So go get started today at Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. All you got to do is pick 2 or more players, choose more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. Get started today when you go to prizepicks.com/CLNS, or if you download the app, use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Now, coming in at number 5 is Marquise Hollywood Brown. And I think this could be another guy who is a little bit under the radar, has spent a couple seasons with the Arizona Cardinals, and I know these last 2 years, a little bit underwhelming from Hollywood. 100 targets, only 51 receptions, 574 yards. But you have to realize also, this year, he didn't have Kyler Murray the entire year. He had randos throwing him the ball. So, kind of makes sense for his stats there. If we look back to 2021, that's the Hollywood Brown that you really want to see. 91 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He's a kind of a guy similar to Tank Dell, a little bit smaller in stature, but is a guy who can make people miss an open space, can take the top off of a defense with the deep ball. Hollywood Brown would be a really good get for the Houston Texans in free agency. Just like this next guy, Gabriel Davis, the wide receiver from the Buffalo Bills. Another guy who, when we look at his stats, not eye-popping whenever you look at him, but Gabriel Davis could be a good third option for the Houston Texans. Now, whenever the Bills brought in Stephon Diggs, he got a lion's share of the targets and receptions for that team, but Gabe Davis, I think, could really shine in a role with the Houston Texans and could be another guy who you could get on a cheaper contract around like the $9, $10, $11 million per year range. I wouldn't mind the Texans taking a flyer on Gabriel Davis and adding him to this wide receiver room. Now, I'm asking you about the wide receivers and, talking about how we could sign one in free agency. But in no means do I think the Texans should spend the most money on wide receiver out of all the positions that they need in free agency. I think it's clearly defensive tackle, but this isn't Jeremy Sports. This is Chat Sports. So I'm going to ask you folks at home, what position should the Texans spend the most money on this offseason? I think it's defensive tackle. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Get down in the comment section and let me know right now as we get into our top three free agent targets the Texans could sign this offseason. Number 3 is Michael Pittman. And kind of the same with Calvin Ridley. You could take a player away from a division rival and make them weaker as you make yourself stronger. These are the stats for Pittman the last 4 years. Is a consistent guy, this year, over 1,000 yards, over 100 receptions. Last year, didn't quite get there, And then the year before that, over 1,000 yards as well. Michael Pittman is a big-bodied young receiver just entering his prime. I do think that he's going to command a little bit more money than a couple of the guys prior, but Michael Pittman Jr. could be an interesting name. I do think the Colts end up re-signing him or at least franchise tagging him, but if he does hit the open market, Michael Pittman would be a really good third wide receiver. You have him on the outside with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. That offense would look scary. Number 2 on my list, bring him home. Bring him home. It's Mike Evans, the kid from Houston, really Galveston, but he also played his college ball at Texas A&M, and if anything Mike Evans is, it is consistent. He gets over 1,000 yards in every single season. It doesn't matter who's throwing him the ball. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Mike Evans is that dude. We look over the past 4 years, 1,200 yards, 1,400 yards. It doesn't matter. He is an absolute baller. So bringing Mike Evans could be a good option for the Texans, even though he's a little bit older, just like some of these guys who are my honorable mentions who didn't quite make the list. Odell Beckham Jr., Kendrick Bourne, Noah Brown, DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, and KJ Osborne. All guys who didn't quite make the list, but were right there on the cusp. And my number 1 target for the Texans is T. Higgins. And I know the reports are the Bengals are going to try to bring T. Higgins back, are going to eventually re-sign him. I don't care. If he's available, you got to look into him. I know Mike Evans 2, T. Higgins 1. It really comes down to age, and I still think Mike Evans could garner a lot of money in free agency, even though his age, because he's a machine. But you can sign T. Higgins for around the same price tag, and he's, 5 years younger? I would go ahead and do that. We look at his numbers the past 4 years. This past season, only played in 12 games, but still had over 650 yards and 5 touchdowns. The past 2 years, over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, and in 2020 had 908 yards and 6 touchdowns. He is a big wide receiver who has a giant catch radius and is explosive. T. Higgins would be a great option to sign in free agency, my number 1 option for the Houston Texans. Now, that's my list. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments section. You can boo me or you can praise me. Just let me know. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Twitter and say, Jeremy, why'd you make this bonehead decision? Or Jeremy, why did you not add this guy? Let me know down on Twitter at Jeremy Chuggs. Go ahead and DM me, tweet at me, and let me know your thoughts. And as always, go down and hit that subscribe button for daily Texans news and rumors content. We're the number 1 Texans channel on YouTube. So get started today and hit that subscribe button.